15, verse 38. So let's start with that. I'm not going to get on we may do a Q&A on should women wear Tzit-Tzits, things like that. We'll do that in the Q&A. I'm not going to do that now, but we'll do that in the Q&A because I want to give you what it says in Hebrew. But let's speak just the commandment in the first place. Speak unto the children of Israel. Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Speak unto the children of Israel. As soon as you say that, someone's going to say, see, it's for the Jew.
Yeah.
Right? Now some of you are laughing because you know that's a silly remark. Why? Because the people don't know what it's talking about. That's why it's a silly remark. Okay? Because they've been trained like Pavlov's dog. Ding, ding. Okay? Then you're going to forget about that. You've done that a long time. Okay? They've been trained like Pavlov's dog that Jew equals Israel and Israel equals Jew. And so they assume that when you say Israel, you're talking about Jew. When in reality, you know the answer to that. Jew is Judah, and Judah is only one tribe of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Israel is a person. Besides that, Israel is a person. His name was Jacob. He was renamed Israel. And so these sons come from a person called Israel. And from, I'm going to make a very blunt statement here, but you need to check it out yourself. Don't believe me. From the very first mention of the word Israel till the very last mention of the word Israel, the definition has never, ever, ever changed. It's always been the same. It's always been those from the loins of Abraham who believe, and all the strangers and sojourners who join themselves with them. Yeah. They're called the children of Israel. From the very first mention, from the Exodus on, wandering in the wilderness, they're all called the children of Israel. Why? Because God is the God of Israel. That's a possessive term. Okay? The Bible doesn't say, I'm the God of the Christians. I'm the God of the Gentiles. I'm the God of the church. He says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel. It's a possessive term. And so, to give you an example, because sometimes it's better to take universal concepts, which is hard to grasp the whole universe sometimes. Put them into your living room. Just take the concept and put it in something simplistic as your living room. Let's pretend that we have a table in here, and there's 12 chairs around. Is there 12 chairs around there? And maybe 12. Maybe 14. What about 14 or 15? Okay, don't get that in his head. Get the table. You got 12 chairs around it. Okay, each of the 12 tribes is sitting there. Reuben, Gad, Levi, Naphtali, Zebulun, and so forth. They're all sitting there at the table. And to be consistent with traditional religious teaching, in other words, Jew equals Israel and Israel equals Jew, you would walk up to Reuben and he would say, hey, Judah, let's go have a glass of wine. Let's bug out on this place. And Judah would say to you, excuse me, Reuben would say to you, excuse me, Judah's sitting out at the end under the table, buddy. Okay? I'm Reuben. Okay? Now, is Reuben an Israelite?
Yeah.
Yes. Is Judah an Israelite?
Yeah.
Yes. So Judah is Israel, but Israel is not Judah.
Right.
Okay? And so that's the first problem, is they've rearranged and redefined the nomenclature and the words and so forth. And so once again, the children of Israel have always been the same thing that Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. Speaking to the Gentiles, he says, now you are no longer strangers and sojourners, but fellow citizens with the saints of God and of the commonwealth of Israel. So Paul says the same thing. You're no longer strangers and sojourners. That's what you were before you were grafted in. Mm-hmm. And so now you're with them, you're all the same. Why? Because Paul said in Ephesians chapter 4, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit, for there is one body, one Spirit, one flesh, one God, who is above all and through all, one baptism, etc. So you know the verse, I just love it. Okay. But there's only one. There's only one body, Paul says. So that means what? We're all one. Okay, there's only one. All right. Speaking to the children of Israel, who would that be? All who are homeborn that believe in the God of Israel, and all the strangers and so it's everybody who believes. And bid them that they make Tzit-Tzits, okay, if you will, in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders, or suits, a ribbon of blue. So the commandment, and like I said, I'm going to go into the details in Q&A if you want to, because you may not want to, and then we'll just go on. The commandment is just this. That's all the commandment is, right there. All the rest of this is tradition.
Too burdensome.
Okay? And so, in other words, it doesn't have to be white.
Bills is blue.
Now, Most peoplers are blue and white. And the only reason they do this is because blue and white is the national colors of Israel. It's the national colors of their flag and so on and so forth. Okay? It doesn't have to be white. That's traditionally what it is. It's tied 100,000 different ways. Okay? Because it doesn't tell you how to do that. Once again, we'll deal with that in Q&A. My point is simply this. This is the commandment, and there's a reason for this commandment. Now, most people see this commandment in terms of form, including rabbinical Judaism. They interpret the commandment in terms of form rather than what? Function. What is the function of the CCO? Why is God telling us to His children to do this?
To remind them.
So we can look upon them and be reminded of His commandments. But I'm going to take it a little bit further. Okay?
Betrothal.
I'm going to give you something that happened to me. Seems like a lot of things happen to me in Walmart. You know what that is? So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in Walmart. Okay?
Walmart is the field.
That's right. Walmart is the field. Thank you. So here I'm walking through Walmart. Here comes a tip. Okay. So I'm walking through Walmart, and one of the congregants, one of the people who used to be in my congregation is not anymore because, well, I had stepped down. Okay, so he was still going there. He sees me. Hadn't seen me in a long time. And of course, this is what always happens. They you know. They're talking to you, and they pass it down like this. This happens a whole lot of times. All of a sudden lately, it didn't happen the first maybe 10 years of doing a lot of flying, because I spend most of my life in airports. But here's what's happened to me in the last 2 or 3 years. I'll put put your stuff up on the belt, okay, and you stand there waiting for your turn, and the guy goes like this, right? And you come forward, and they go like that. It's all the way you're coming. And then his eyes are coming. All of a sudden, in the last couple of years, they're pulling me off to the side and searching me. Okay? It's only been lately. And every time except twice. I don't know how many times this happened. Let's say it's maybe 10 times. Every time except 2 times. They get me in there, and they say, "Would you put out your arms?" I go, "Yeah." And as they're doing this, they're saying, "Sir, there's nothing wrong with you. I didn't pull you over because there's anything wrong with you." He says, "What are those?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked." Okay? And I get an opportunity to tell them about it. When I take tours to Israel, I tell the people who have them on their clothes, I would advise you to take them off your clothes and either don't wear tzitziot at all or put them on a talit and wear a kippah. Okay? Because according to rabbinic form, it has to be on a talit, and you can't wear a tzitzit with a talit without a kippah. So if you have a talit without a kippah, now see, now we're getting into the religious stuff. And that's the reputation that it gets when it comes to these things, is they're not thinking of what the commandment says.
Amen.
Many of our religious friends are thinking of what they see on PBS specials, and things like that. Piot hanging off the side, so forth, leaning against the wheel, and that's the image that they have of what we're getting into. Okay? When what do we want to do? We want to obey the God of the Bible. We want to do what He says.
Amen.
And so I told some guys this, and so we get to the Western Wall. How many have been to Israel? You know what I'm talking about. Okay, we get to the Western Wall. You know the long line, the security line. I'm kind of in the back because I want to make sure all my group is there, because I get really paranoid in Israel sometimes. I don't want to lose anybody. I'm scared to death that I get a reputation. Oh my God, they lost somebody. So I'm in the back of the line, and I look up the front of the line, and there's 2 guys in my group that wore them on their pants. And here come the Israeli guards with the guns and everything, and they pull them off the side and take them to someplace over here. So I come running up there, and I said, "Well, these people are my group, and I need to know what happened," and so on and so forth. And they said, "Well, they're over there in that room." Okay? So I go over in the room, okay, and they're laughing up a storm. In the room. I go, "What's going on here?" And he says, "Well, we pulled these 2 guys over because they saw their tzitziot on their pants." Because, yeah, we're Messianic believers too. We don't get much fellowship here. So they're having a good time. Okay.
That's awesome.
Getting back on track. I'm in Walmart, and you all know the scenario. You already know exactly how it's going to go, because it's the way religious people think. Okay? So he comes up to me, and he's talking to me, but he's doing like this. And he says, finally, he goes, "What are those?" And I said, "Well, they're called tzitziot." And I go, "What's up with that?" And I said, "Well, it's in Numbers chapter 15. See, I made the big mistake of quoting the Bible. That was my first mistake. I quoted the scriptures. Okay? And what do you think he said?
It's Old Testament.
In the Old Testament.
Same line.
It's a Jewish thing. Okay? And this was like 15 years ago. Okay? Or 12 or whatever it was. And I had not been donning them very long, okay? And all I knew to do at that time was just quote the scripture. So I did. And I said, well, you know, read it yourself, and said you need to make that decision. And I knew there was a point in, you know, trying to explain all these things. But then 3 or 4 years later, I'm down teaching in Costa Rica, going from village to village and village and so forth, which I do quite often because I love Costa Rica. And I'm going from one village to the next. And in order to get to this next village, we got to go through a smaller village in which there's people there that don't wear a lot of clothes. Okay? Think National Geographic 1960. Okay? You'll get the image. Okay, don't think about it. Anyway. And so this little girl grabs a hold of this finger, and she's jerking around and throwing the finger from here to there all over the place. And after a couple of minutes, I mean, it was kind of cute at first, but after a couple of minutes, it's getting a little irritating, okay? And so I said, oh, okay, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to slap her or whatever. Okay, so finally she lets go, and I go over to, actually, I kind of drug her with me. We go over to an adult, okay? So I'm talking, go up to the adult, and I say, excuse me, but can you tell me why this girl is grabbing onto my ring finger all the time?
Wedding ring.
She says, well, I'll go ask her. So she goes.
So go ask her.
I'll go ask the little girl why she's hanging onto your ring finger. Okay? So she goes ask her, and she comes back and she says, the little girl wants to know, why are you wearing a piece of metal wrapped around your finger? And it dawned on me, oh my goodness, I assume that every culture, when a man and woman is married, they wear a wedding ring. That's not true. That's a cultural thing. That is a man-made tradition. I think it's a good one. I'm okay with it. But nonetheless, it's a man-made tradition. And when I go out with this man-made tradition out into the world, which is perfectly accepted by everybody, most people, what I'm doing is I'm showing the world, by wearing this on the outside, I'm showing the world I'm married. I'm married to my Carol. She's the most important thing on the world. I'm totally devoted to my Carol. All other women stay away. I mean, that's what it's there for. Okay, so I'm devoted to her, and to her alone. All other women stay away. Now that's perfectly acceptable. But if God gives us one thing, that when I go out in the world tells people I worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Him alone. All other gods stay away. That's a Jewish thing.
Amen.
Okay? The hypocrisy of these things. If it's a man-made thing, that's perfectly okay. But if it's a God-made thing, oh no, we can't have that. Okay?
Amen,
That's Jewish
Brad.
things. Okay? As a matter of fact, here's something I would suggest you all do. Try it on your friends once in a while. Okay? Another short story at Walmart. Okay? I'm at Walmart one time, and it's Pesach.
Dead battery.
Okay? It's very